Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmidt. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. 19 aye votes, 7 no votes.
I vote, stay in the motion of Alderman from the 7th and perfected Board Bill number 100, committee substitute.
Board Bill 105, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance approving the petition of owners of certain real property to establish the 212 South Grand Community Improvement District, authorizing the execution of a transportation project agreement between the city and the 212 South Grand Transportation Development District, containing an emergency clause and a severability clause.
Alderman from the 19th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 105, committee substitute.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I rise in support of this bill 105, committee substitute, and we are looking at a bill that is very common to all of us in approving a community improvement district. This is allowing the opportunity for the property owners there to establish it. I'm sorry.
You like to make a motion for?
I'd like to make a motion for approval, sir.
Moved by the Alderman from the 19th. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Alderman, please proceed.
Thank you. So I'm just asking for support for the Community Improvement District for 212 South Grand.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 19th. I'll entertain this. I've already you guys have got me tired.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Further discussion? Alderman from the 19th, you recognize the close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I renew my motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we perfect Board Bill number 105, committee substitute. All in favor signify by been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Griffin. Alderwoman Triplett. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderman Schmidt. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. 23 aye votes, 3 no votes.
I vote. You stay in the motion of the Alderman from the 19th and perfected Board Bill number 105, committee substitute.
Thank you.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Alderman from the 5th, you recognize.
Mr. President, I'd like to move to suspend the rules for the purpose of bringing the following board bills down to the third reading consent calendar. Board Bill 102, 109 committee substitute, 110 committee substitute, 111, 112, 117, 93, 106, 108, 113, 114, 115, 116, 119, 88, 89, 92, 95, committee substitute, 105, committee substitute, 121, 104, and 122.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 5th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Griffin, Alderwoman Triplett. I didn't hear your vote. Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmidt, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvy, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruzen, President Reed,
Aye.
Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderman Conway, Alderman Wessels, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, 25 aye votes, no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderwoman from the 5th. Third reading consent calendar.
37, floor substitute, 99, 64, 79, 87, 94, 96, 98, 2 floor substitute, 97, 60, 63, 81, 83, 84, 85, 66, 102, 109 committee substitute, 110 committee substitute, 111, 112, 117, 93, 106, 108, 113, 114, 115, 116, 119, 88, 89, 92, 95 committee substitute, 105 committee substitute, 121, 104, and 122.
Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the third reading the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for a third reading and final passage of the aforementioned bills on the consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Griffin, Alderwoman Triplett, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmidt, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Troop. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Griffin. Alderman Conway. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. 24 aye votes, no votes.
By your vote, sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 13th. And third read and finally pass the aforementioned bills. Third reading, report of engrossments.
Board Bill 118, floor substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance approving blighting study and a plan for a 212 South Grand redevelopment area containing a severability clause.
Alderman from the 19th, you recognize on third reading and final passage of Board Bill number 118, floor substitute.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As you know, we had a lot of discussion on this bill.
Alderman, would you like to make a motion?
Let me make a motion to approve, please.
It's been moved for third reading and final passage of Board Bill number 118, floor substitute. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Alderman from the 19th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. This board bill, I thought, was a very simple bill. It's a 10-year tax abatement with a redevelopment plan. For some reason, somehow, not only did the media take something and turn it into a story that was not true, this board, this legislative body, does not pass demolition bills. There's no such thing as that. It does not exist. It is impossible to even be done by this legislative body. This is a tax abatement bill. It is an incentive for the development that is taking place on that property there at 212 South Grand. As we had talked about earlier, there have been 2 other developments completed on that footprint there. There's a current development under progress that is a $34 million property. And now this last piece of property, we've asked for a tax abatement to get incentive for someone to come in and develop that last piece of property. There was also some concern and some misunderstanding about historic tax credits, TIFs, and all other incentives that we provide here at the Board of Aldermen through legislative process. No one in this legislative body can approve historic tax credits, nor do we evaluate the product in the end of the development, nor do we have oversight and control over that. That is done either by a state department or a federal department. Those grants to developers are very complicated, and they're very, very, very well attended to. Aside from the fact that the developer must prove the dollars that they have put into the building in order to get the tax incentive on their tax returns, they also have to have goodwill in the community. They have to meet certain requirements that the government feels should be a part of any development, and that's community engagement, hiring people out of the community, a number of things, minority inclusion. It goes on and on and on. So when you do apply for these different funds as a developer, you must meet many, many guidelines that are above and beyond anything that this legislative body has the opportunity or the right to do. So I am not confused, although the media has gone out of its way to confuse people by advertising for the last 2 days that a demolition bill was being passed today. Again, there is no such thing as that. This legislative body does not have that power. This is simply an incentive with a 10-year tax abatement. And I hope that either the current developer or someone that he chooses who has a great idea for the site has everything in mind that this community wants to have considered. So that is not our job to make determinations about how, when, where, and what happens with state and federal allocations. Those governmental bodies are quite capable, have been capable for years. We have seen millions and millions of dollars as incentives come into our community. We can look at downtown, we can look at near South Side, we can look at Midtown, Central West End, North St. Louis. You can look at the entire city and see the benefit from these incentives that have been made available to the city of St. Louis and the developers who have chosen to come in and help us renovate this city. So I am asking for approval of this 10-year tax abatement bill, which has no other power but to give an incentive. Thank you.
Alderman from the 23rd.
You know, I agree with the Alderwoman from the 19th, and you know, I agree that it's something that does help improve when you tear stuff down and rebuild and renew. But I'm not going to support it only because of the amount of emails and phone calls I got, because the constituents matter. Even though it's normal that we support each other and what you do in your own ward is supported in normal cases, I think the people that called and emailed made a point that they were against it, and I think as an elected official, I can't support the bill. I support the concept, I just can't support the bill. I appreciate the time.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. First, I want to acknowledge and express my appreciation for the amendment or the change that was made to this bill last week on the floor. I think it's a better bill than it was previously, although after 8 days of consideration, I think I am still very much opposed to the passage of this bill. In 2007, the owner of this property, Rick Yackey, made an application to put 4 parcels on the National Register of Historic Places. I've read this application. There's 5 structures on the site, and they listed 4 parcels as contributing structures in that application. That application was approved by the state DNR and by the National Park Service. After it was approved, the owners, Mr. Yackey and the other owners of the other parcels, used that nomination in order to leverage roughly $27 million of state and federal historic tax credits. The tax credit program is a great program, and we have seen many, many successful redevelopments in the city of St. Louis because of this program. I think it's a program that everybody in this room supports and wants to see continue. But tax credits are money. Tax credits are cash in the hands of property owners. Public money. And when an owner goes out of his way to list a property on the National Register of Historic Places 10 years early, that building was only 40 years old in 2007, he's made a bet, and he profited by making that bet to the tune of many millions of federal and state tax dollars. Now, 4 years later, I find it hard to believe that that same property owner can come back and say, I was wrong. Yeah, I got the money, but I was wrong, and now this is a blighted building. This is a blighted building that needs further incentives, and I listened to him say 3 times in the committee hearing on this that he wanted to tear that building down. He wants to tear down a building that he placed on the National Register of Historic Places and received tax money for. That is not okay. He made a decision that he benefited from, and that's fine, and they did a good job previously and still redeveloping the other properties on that site. But he included this one. He said this one's historic too. This saucer-shaped building is also historic. That's what he said. He made that determination. He put it on the application. So why don't we hold him to that? If we pass out this bill, yes, it's tax abatement. There's tax abatement in the bill. But this is also a blighting bill. And it says that this property is a problem property, it's deficient, it's unsafe for public health, and if and when Mr. Yaki goes and applies for a demolition permit for this building, it'll go to the Cultural Resources Office, and what they will do is they will say, well, the Board of Aldermen made a determination that this is a blighted property. They're going to look at an ordinance that we passed. So this is our chance to weigh in on whether we want to preserve a historic structure, a structure that the owner says is historic, the state says is historic, and the federal government says is historic. Those three people all still say it's historic. So the Cultural Resources Office, they follow rules. They have guidelines, they follow the ordinance, and they'll make a recommendation to the Preservation Board when there is, if and when there is a demolition permit applied for. But we make the rules. They follow the rules, we make the rules, and this is our chance to weigh in on this. And yes, I think it's totally appropriate to defer to the local alderman or woman in most cases. But when something like this drums up this much interest from the public, I think it's incumbent upon us to consider the opinions of the public and determine if we agree with those opinions or do not agree with those opinions. Now, everybody wants this to be a successful project. Nobody would vote against this and say, I want this to fail. Nobody's saying they want failure. What they are saying is we want accountability. An owner got tax credits, public money. He said it was historic. Let's hold him accountable. If it's historic, it needs to stay. And that is the bottom line. This is our final chance to weigh in on it. And I would hope people would consider, if we vote this through and the building is demolished by the end of the summer, like the owner said he would like it to be, and then your tax-paying constituents come to you and say, why did that guy get taxpayer money for a building he said was historic, and then you let him knock it down 4 years later? I think that's a very difficult question for any of us to answer, so I hope we'll carefully consider that when voting on this bill. So I urge people to vote no on this bill today and encourage the property owner to look for a better solution that respects the decisions he, the state, and the federal government have already made regarding this property. Thank you.
Alderman from the 8th.
Morning, Mr. President. Afternoon. A couple of things. I think the Alderwoman from the 19th Ward has put it very well early on in this process, and it's something that we have to, among ourselves, make a determination. She had said early on that if these people had wanted to save the building, they should have bought it. That they had the opportunity to buy it. And I can tell you, on so many of these plans throughout the city, we have a very dedicated group of brick kissers who believe that everything should be saved at all costs. I mean, and that's a great idea, and I think all of us believe in it. But the thing is, at some point in time, if the economic cost doesn't justify it, you can't do it. And we've gone counter to that argument many times. But I think that she put it very well, and I think for those individuals that want to save all of these buildings, they need to come up with a better way to do it. You know, it's like me, my neighbor, you know, one of my neighbors, any of my neighbors, you know, or if I live next door to a 7-Eleven, you know, damn it, I want that 7-Eleven cleaned up, okay? I bought my house in the 7 next door because it was cheap. But I don't own the 7-Eleven building. I don't really have a lot of right to tell 7-Eleven, and I'm not bad rapping 7-Eleven. It's an example. I don't have the right to tell 7-Eleven to change that size of that 7-Eleven on the outside of the building. I don't own it. I don't have the right to impose my taste, which probably are kind of gaudy, on my neighbor, because I don't own that property. They own it. I think the Alderwoman from 19th Ward said it very well. I would say that also the Alderman from the 23rd Ward has made an argument that this case might be a little bit different if there was some reliance on the spaceship in being certified as a historic structure. I haven't been there in many, many years myself. I drive by there quite a bit. But there was ample opportunity for other people to buy it. But the detrimental reliance on getting all of those tax credits, that's a little bit of a tough one for me to bite. And the unfortunate thing is, I opened the Post-Dispatch, and those young people with the spaceships on their heads, they live in the 8th Ward. And I know many of those people in that picture. But I will tell you, I believe in voting with the Alderwoman from the 19th, but I'm really unhappy with the way this went down. My constituents are fairly vehement, but it's not just this project. Each of you, as we go forward, somehow we have to send a message that if the people that want to oppose various demolitions, they've got to figure out a way to do the economics on that. But I appreciate what the Alderwoman from the 19th has said with respect to this, because I think that's the message that everybody in the city needs to understand. If we want to save these, then you better find people who can do it economically or in an economically feasible manner. And we have so many incentives from the state of Missouri and the things, 25% tax credits and the federal 25% tax credits. You have an inordinate amount of subsidies, but from an economic decision, even with all of these historic tax credits and both the federal and the state piled on top of each other, it's very, very hard to make it a go. So the people that want us to save every building, they've got to start working with us on a different level if we're going to save every single building here in the city of St. Louis. The Alderwoman from the 19th Ward was right. The residents of the 8th Ward want that spaceship, and I'm sorry, want that spaceship saved. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate the time here. I, like my colleague from the 24th Ward, share some of his sentiments. I do need to make some points of clarification for the general public, as oftentimes things that get said down here could sometimes be construed or misunderstood. Tax credits are not the same as cash. Okay, that is a big, big distinction. Tax credits are not cash. They can be liquidated, and there's a price that's paid to do that. It is not dollar for dollar. They are not cash. Also, in terms of the tax credits that have been used on the other buildings that are on that site. They have not been used at all in the preservation of the building that used to be Del Taco. So that's another point of clarification that needs to be made. And if in fact that building is contributing to the site as a whole, and not just an individual contributing structure, but as a site as a whole, it is deemed a contributing member. The Park Service, the Federal Park Service, and the Department of Natural Resources have the ability to withdraw tax credits from the project. They have the ability to do that in the event that there is any type of destruction of the historic stature of those buildings. So those are some few points of clarification. I will likely, I appreciate my colleague from the 19th's efforts to amend, the bill last week in terms of, diminishing the wording in there as it relates to demolition, and making this more of a blighting bill than it had been before. And I certainly appreciate her efforts. I know that, I want her to know that those are not in vain. And I appreciate the work that she's put into this and the consideration and everything else. But I will, likely end up voting against the bill, because of where my constituency stands on this at this point in time. And also just my conscience. But I wanted to point that out, make that clarification, and also, commend my colleague from the 19th on the work she did amending the bill last week.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, over the years we talk a lot about blighting, and in past times, because a number of us, including myself, have sought historic districts in order to get some of the access to tax credits. And whenever we do that, the word blight always comes into the discussion. And I always talk about that's truly the charm, most of the charm that the city of St. Louis has. It's an older city, and the state of Missouri uses the term blight. That blight definition is an area which, by reason of the predominance of defective or inadequate street layout, insanitary or unsafe conditions, deterioration of site improvements, improper subdivision or obsolete platting, or the existence of conditions which endanger life or property by fire or other causes, or any combination of such factors, retards the provision of housing accommodations, or constitutes an economic or social liability or a menace to the public health, safety, morals, or welfare in its present condition and use. And that's what this bill is. It's a blighting bill, and a lot of people look at it negatively, that you're blighting their property. But it's also, most of the city of St. Louis was built very close to one another. It's a very urbanized environment. It's very old. And so there's a predominance of a lot of things that people today would not do if they were building new in that location. This is not a demolition bill. I love the building as well, and there are provisions for the review of demolition. And we made that clearer last time by motion of the sponsor of that, in terms of the fact that if Cultural Resources does its job, they're going to review this very closely. I love the building. I think it's a terrific building. It's a building that you can't find all over the place. And if Cultural Resources says that they shouldn't tear it down because it's a unique sort of building, it's a historic building, that the state and federal government have determined it as such, then they'll make that decision. And then the applicant has the right to go to the Preservation Board and make that appeal. And if at some point in that appeal process they do something that's inappropriate in their mind, then somebody has the right to go to court to appeal that decision. So there's a lot of decisions and a lot of process in place. What we're doing is we have a development plan. It's a blighting plan. It provides for 10 years of tax abatement as part of that, and as I understand it, no provision for eminent domain because the owner already has it. It's not a demolition bill. It's a blighting bill. We do these frequently in order to provide leverage and the ability for the developer to do something in a place where they might not otherwise be able to do that. So that is what this bill is. It is a blighting bill. Blighting by some is considered negative. The owner of this building is asking for that in order to have access to the tax credits. That's all. If he wants to get demolition, he still has another process to go through. And we are not the arbiters of that process. That's only if you're
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I interrogate the Alderman from the 19th?
Alderman from the 19th, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 27th?
Yes, Mr. President.
Alderman from the 27th, please proceed.
Thank you. Alderwoman, how long has the building been empty?
Oh, it just closed last week.
Last week?
Yes.
Because we know that they went bankrupt and a few other things, or what?
The details are, the lease on the building still had 4 more 5-year options, and the developer was under the assumption that they would use those options.
Correct.
But last December, they made a decision based on their corporate status that they were not making money in the St. Louis area with those businesses, and they have closed those that were in the city of St. Louis. And it closed, I think, on July 1st.
Okay. Is there an alternate business coming into this building?
Well, when you find out something like that, kind of like at the 11th hour, it takes time, to work things out. You've got to put the information out there to try to attract some people. And so I don't think the developer even has an idea who may or may not want to go in there at this point. We don't know. Someone may come and say, I love this building, I want to put something in it. And again, we're not talking about demolition here. We're talking about providing a tax incentive, so preferably a good retailer will come there. That's what we want.
Now, I did hear on the news that somebody had this idea of moving it for a gas station. How true is this?
No one has talked directly to the developer or myself about that.
Okay, all right. And there is no demolition in the bill that you're presenting today?
No, sir. As you know from having blighting bills over the years, that we don't have the power to say you can tear anything down.
The reason why I'm asking this, and Alderwoman, thank you.
Yes,
The reason
sir.
why I was asking the Alderwoman from the 19th these questions because sometimes constituents looking at this get confused. Things that are in the bill and things that are not in the bill. But I wanted to be very clear. That's why I was asking these questions, Alderwoman. We don't have that power yet. If it ever gets over to the Preservation Board that I sit on, then we'll make that decision. Okay? Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Any further comments? Any further comments? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 19th, you recognize the close on Board Bill number 118, floor substitute.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the things I wanted to reiterate again that it is very important to understand that we do have processes that must be done in order to allow anyone to demolish a building in the city of St. Louis, and most especially if it's on a historic register. And that's why we have two departments, the due diligence on behalf of the city from Cultural Resources and the Preservation Group that has a number of different entities who sit there from landmarks on. So that process itself has done very well in the city. I can tell you about two projects in my ward. One was $134 million, and we had to go back and redesign around a building because they said, no, you're not going to tear the building down. And we did it because they said no. And that project got historic tax credits, but we had to adhere to the decisions of that board. Also, I had another project, and when you look at the other side of it, there was a private owner who said, I don't want to sell my property. I don't care what you offer me. And again, if you're going to do the development, you find a way to do it, and we did, and we built around them. So you have to understand that we can't take any property away from anybody except for one way of doing that, and that is a very long, complicated thing, but this bill does not address that. This bill does not address demolition. This is a simple 10-year tax abatement incentive, and all other issues, which I also have some concerns about, as well as other constituents in the city, and I know that. But I feel as though if they stay vigilant, they share their concerns with those various other entities that may have to weigh in on this, if ever a demolition permit is asked for. And again, I say if ever. So again, I renew my motion.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 19th, seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Troop, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Griffin, Alderwoman Triplett, Alderwoman Young, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderman Wessels, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Florida, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderman Schmidt, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvy, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson, Alderman Carter. He said aye. Alderwoman Cruzen, President Reed,
Aye.
Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Triplett, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Cruzen. Fifteen aye votes, 9 no votes.
By a vote, sustain the motion of the Alderwoman from the 19th. And
Thank you,
third
Mr.
read and
President,
finally-
members of the board.
Third read and finally passed. Board Bill number 118, floor substitute.
That's the extent of third reading, report of engrossment, and final passage.
Report of enrollment.
Board Bills 99, 64, 79, 87, 94, 96, 97, 98, 60, 63, 81, 83, 84, 85, 118 floor substitute, 2 floor substitute, 66, 37 floor substitute, 2, 109 committee substitute, 110 committee substitute, 111, 112, 117, 93, 106, 108, 113, 114, 115, 116, 119, 88, 89, 92, 95 committee substitute, 105 committee substitute, 121, 104, and 122.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. And just as a reminder, everybody, we're going to be going into closed session. Alderman from the 15th is going to take me a minute to sign all these, but I'll be right back.
Just so you have her, please note that the sponsors, just make a point of that because we didn't write them in. When we get here, just say, Madam Clerk, please note that those are the sponsors. He's going to say, please note that blank is a sponsor and blank is a sponsor.
So who is it?
Florida, and he's just going to say, please note.
First reading of resolutions.
Resolution 142, sponsored by Alderwoman Florida, Enterprise Zone for Civil Property, LLC, at 3714 Holt Avenue.
Madam Clerk, please make note on the agenda for Resolution 142, pass the hyphen, should say the Alderwoman Florida, and Resolution 143, pass the hyphen, Alderwoman Young.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 15th, you recognize on first reading of Resolution 142.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we send Resolution 142 to HUD's committee.
Moved by the Alderman from the 15th, entertain a second on the motion, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please sign Resolution 142 to HUD's.
So noted. Resolution 143, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, Enterprise Zone for Clean the Uniform Company at 1316 South 7th Street.
Alderman from the 7th, you recognize on the first reading of Resolution number 143.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I'd also like to have Resolution 143 assigned to the HUD's committee.
You want to make a motion to have it moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please sign Resolution 143 to HUD's.
So noted. That's the extent of first reading of resolutions.
Second reading?
We have none.
Ms. Lane, it's unfinished business.
We have none.
Under announcements,
announcements, the meeting of the Personnel Committee shall be closed to the public.
Make notice, not the Personnel Committee, of the Board of Aldermen.
So noted. Shall be closed to the public under the provisions of Section 610.021, number 3, in order to permit the members of